By the time the elevator doors opened on the 43rd floor, the whole building already knew. Not because anyone had sent a memo, not because the story had made it onto the news ticker running along the lobby screens downstairs, but because in a tower like One Wellington West, silence travels faster than sound, and on the morning of the 14th of March, the silence was deafening. 36 hours earlier, no one in that building had known the name Oyin Adebisi. That was the point. She had walked through the glass doors at 10 minutes past 6 on a Wednesday morning, the way she always did when she was in Toronto. Quietly, without announcement, wearing a dark green parka that had seen better winters and carrying a canvas tote bag from a farmer's market in Kensington. No assistant walking ahead of her. No driver holding an umbrella. Just a woman in her mid-40s with natural hair, pulled back and reading glasses perched on top of her head. The way a person does when they keep forgetting where they left them. The lobby of One Wellington West was the kind of space that was designed to make people feel small on purpose. 40-foot ceilings, marble floors the color of a winter sky, a reception desk that ran the full length of one wall, staffed that morning by a young man named Brett, who had been in the job for 11 months and had recently been promoted to Senior Guest Services Associate, a title he took seriously. Oyin approached the desk. She didn't announce herself. She had done this before. Stopped in early, taken the back elevator up to the executive suite before the day officially started, walked the floor while it was still quiet and the cleaning crew was still finishing up. She liked the building before it filled with noise. She liked watching the light come off the lake from the window at the end of the 38th corridor. She had stood at that window the first time she ever set foot in One Wellington West 10 years ago, when she had come to ask a man named Harold Fitch for a meeting he did not want to give her. Harold Fitch no longer worked in the building. She did, but Brett did not know that. Brett had been hired the previous April, and his training had covered visitor protocols, security badge procedures, the correct way to offer a guest sparkling or still, and how to handle the escalating categories of difficult behavior. His training had not, apparently, covered what to do when a woman who owns the building comes through the doors looking like she just stopped in from buying produce. "Can I help you?" Brett said. The tone was the kind that means something different from the words. Oyin looked up. She had been reading something on her phone, a thread from her operations lead in Vancouver. Something about a server migration that was running 4 hours behind schedule. She had been composing a response in her head. She finished the thought, set the phone face down on the counter, and looked at Brett directly. "I'm heading up to the executive floor," she said. 38th. Brett's expression shifted. Not dramatically, just a small tightening around the jaw that people do when they're preparing to deliver a refusal they've decided in advance. "That floor is restricted access. Do you have an appointment?" "I don't need an appointment," she said, pleasantly enough. "I work here." "Do you have a badge?" She didn't. She had left her permanent badge at the Rosedale house, in the bowl by the front door where it lived when she wasn't traveling. She had meant to grab it on the way out, and had instead grabbed her transit card and a granola bar, and spent the whole ride down on the Bloor line thinking about the Vancouver server situation. "I don't have it on me today," she said, "but if you call up to the 38th floor, Daphne will confirm, ma'am." Brett said the word with a kind of finality that suggested the conversation, from his perspective, was over. "This is a secure facility. Without proper identification, I can't allow access to restricted floors. That's policy." There was a beat of silence. Across the lobby, a man in a charcoal suit came through the revolving doors with a travel coffee cup and a visitor badge already clipped to his lapel. Brett looked up, smiled, said good morning. The man nodded without breaking stride and walked directly to the elevator bank. No one asked him for identification. Oyin watched this. She did not say anything about it. She picked up her phone, found the number for the front desk on 38, and held the screen toward Brett. "Do you want to call, or should I?" Brett looked at the screen the way people look at something they've decided not to engage with. "I'm going to have to ask you to wait in the seating area while I follow up," he said, and then, And this was the part that would matter later. The part that the building's internal complaint system would reflect on in considerable detail. He reached out and put his hand on Oyin's forearm. Lightly, briefly, but with the deliberate pressure of someone used to redirecting people physically without asking first. Oyin looked down at his hand on her arm. She looked up at Brett. She did not raise her voice. She had not raised her voice since 1999, when she was 23 years old and working 2 jobs and living in a basement apartment in Brampton, and the world had given her every reason to, and she had decided that wasn't the person she wanted to become. She had not raised her voice in 25 years, and she was not going to start today. She said, very quietly, "Do not touch me." Brett removed his hand. Something in her voice had landed differently than he expected. "I'm going to stand right here," Oyin said, "while you call the 38th floor, and we are going to sort this out in the next 2 minutes." Brett called. He got Daphne. Daphne, who had been executive office manager on 38 for 6 years, and who had personally coordinated Oyin's calendar through 3 corporate acquisitions, a public offering, and a keynote at the Toronto Global Innovation Summit, did not say anything for a moment after Brett explained the situation. The pause lasted perhaps 4 seconds, long enough for Brett to feel something shift without understanding what. "I'll be right down," Daphne said. She was not right down. She was down in 45 seconds, which meant she had already been standing up when she got the call. Daphne was a small woman in her early 50s, with excellent posture and the kind of composure that people develop after decades of managing other people's crises. She came across the lobby floor at a pace that was professionally appropriate and personally urgent, and when she reached the front desk, she looked at Oyin first. "I am so sorry," she said. It was the kind of apology that contains more information than the words themselves. Then she looked at Brett. She didn't say anything to Brett. She just looked at him with the expression of someone doing very rapid arithmetic. "Mrs. Adebisi," she said, turning back, "your office is ready. The Vancouver team left a message. They've resolved the migration issue." She picked up Oyin's tote bag from the counter, not asked to, just did it, out of a reflex older than the job, and gestured toward the elevator bank. Oyin walked with her. At the elevator, while they waited, Daphne kept her voice low. "About 4 minutes," Oyin said. Daphne nodded, filed it, said nothing more. The elevator arrived. They stepped in. The doors closed. Brett stood at the desk for a moment after they were gone. He was trying to organize something in his mind. He thought about the way Daphne had come through the lobby. He thought about the word Mrs. Adebisi. He thought about the way the elevator operated. On the regular floors, you pressed the button. On the executive floor, you used a key. He had not seen Daphne use a key. The elevator had gone straight to 38 without one. He thought about that for quite a long time. Upstairs, Oyin stood at the window she had always liked. The lake was gray this morning, the way it gets in March, when the winter isn't quite finished with you yet. And the light was flat and honest, and she found it, as she always did, steadying. Daphne brought her a coffee without being asked. Black, 1 sugar, the way she had been drinking it for 15 years, and set it on the table beside her. "The incident log for the lobby is automatic," Daphne said. "Anything flagged at the front desk goes to building management and HR within 24 hours. You don't have to do anything." "I know," Oyin said. "I just wanted you to know that you don't have to do anything," Daphne said again, meaning something slightly different the second time. Oyin turned away from the window. She picked up the coffee. She thought about the hand on her forearm. The lightness of it, the assumption behind it, the casual certainty that it was an appropriate thing to do. She thought about the man in the charcoal suit who had walked past the desk without slowing down. She thought about the girl she had been at 23, working 2 jobs, who would have been trembling by now. She wasn't trembling. "Pull the lobby footage for this morning," she said. 6 to 6:15. Daphne wrote it down. "And get me Gordon Achibi on the phone. Before 9. Gordon Achibi was the head of building operations and had been, for the past 3 years, technically reporting to Oyin through 2 layers of management that most people in the building weren't aware of. He was also the person responsible for front desk staffing decisions. Daphne left to make the call. Oyin drank her coffee. Outside, the lake shifted. A break in the cloud cover somewhere to the southwest sent a long, flat bar of light across the water, and for a moment the whole thing turned silver. She thought about the word ma'am. She thought about the particular inflection that had been wrapped around it. She thought about the fact that she had taken public transit to her own building that morning because she liked the city better at eye level, because she liked watching people read on the subway, because she had never been able to fully shake the habit of experiencing the world the way most people experienced it. Close up, without protection, with no buffer between herself and the ordinary texture of a day. She thought about what it would cost her to give that up. She decided it wouldn't cost her anything at all. The meeting with Gordon Achibi lasted 20 minutes. He had the footage by 8:47. He had reviewed it by 9:03. By 9:15, he was sitting across from Oyin in the small conference room off the executive suite. And he had the expression of a man who understood the severity of what he was looking at without needing it explained to him. "The physical contact," he said. "Yes," Oyin said. "That's a termination-level infraction under the harassment policy, regardless of anything else." "I'm aware of the policy," she said. "I approved the last revision." Gordon looked at the table for a moment. "Do you want to be present for the process, or would you prefer I handle it?" "Handle it," she said. "But I want the process documented fully, not summarized. Documented, understood, and I want the front desk training reviewed. Not just for Brett, for everyone who has worked that desk in the past 2 years." She paused. "I want to know what they're being taught about who belongs in this building." Gordon wrote that down. After he left, Oyin sat alone in the conference room for a while. Not because she was upset. She had moved past the acute edge of it during the elevator ride up, the way she always moved through difficult things, by feeling them completely for a few minutes and then deciding what to do. She had been doing this since she was a child in Scarborough, in a house that didn't have much money but had the specific kind of discipline that comes from parents who believe deeply that how you respond to the world matters more than what the world does to you. Her mother had said, "The people who try to make you small are afraid of the space you take up. Don't shrink. Take up more." She had been 9. She had not fully understood it then. She understood it completely now. She opened her laptop and pulled up the operations report from Vancouver. At 2 in the afternoon, a man named Clement Fairfax arrived at 1 Wellington West for a meeting on the 38th floor. Clement Fairfax was the CFO of a mid-sized financial services firm that had been in conversations with Adebisi Capital Group for the better part of 4 months. He had privately been somewhat skeptical of the partnership, not for any formal reason. The numbers were sound, the strategic fit was clear, but for the kind of reason that doesn't get written into meeting notes, the kind that lives in an attitude and a set of assumptions that a person might not even be fully aware of carrying. He had expected, for reasons he could not have precisely articulated, that the person heading the meeting would be the man whose name was third on the email chain. He had been in 7 meetings over the past 4 months, and he had still, somehow, formed this expectation. Oyin walked in and sat at the head of the table. Clement Fairfax looked at her. He looked at the seat she was in. He recalibrated. Oyin watched him recalibrate. She had been watching people recalibrate in boardrooms for 20 years. She knew every version of it. The quick blink, the slight stiffening, the moment of reorientation that a person does when the world turns out to be different from what they'd assumed. She didn't comment on it. She never commented on it. She just waited for the moment to pass and the meeting to begin. "Thank you for coming in," she said. "I know you've been working primarily with the Vancouver team. I wanted this conversation to happen in person." "Of course," Clement said. He had recovered. He was professional. He folded his hands on the table. The meeting lasted an hour and 40 minutes. Oyin asked 3 questions that Clement could not answer immediately and had to defer. She raised a structural concern about the proposed equity arrangement that, by his own admission, his team had missed. She laid out a revised timeline that addressed 3 of the 4 concerns his board had raised in their last letter, and she did it without notes. By the end of the meeting, something had shifted in Clement Fairfax's face. Not dramatically, just the small rearrangement that happens when a person has spent time with someone who is considerably more than they expected, and they know it, and they're not quite sure what to do with knowing it. He shook her hand at the door. "I'll be in touch by end of week," he said, and she could hear that he meant it in a different way than he'd meant the previous 4 times someone on his side had said something like it. After he left, Daphne appeared at the door. The building's communications director called. "Something's showing up on social media. A post about what happened this morning." Oyin looked up. "One of the lobby staff," Daphne said. "Not Brett. Someone who witnessed it. They didn't name you, but they described it. It's getting traction." Oyin thought about this. What kind of traction? It's been shared about 4,000 times in the past 2 hours. She thought about what her mother would have said. She thought about the girl at 23. "Let it run," she said. By Thursday morning, it had been shared 60,000 times. The post was not inflammatory. It was quiet, actually, written in the way that things written by tired people often are, without drama, just the flat description of a thing witnessed. Watched a black woman in her 40s get stopped at the front desk of a Bay Street office building this morning. She said she worked there. He put his hand on her arm to redirect her to the waiting area. She told him not to touch her. Turns out she owns the building. Nobody apologized. That last line, nobody apologized. The comments were not quiet. By Thursday afternoon, 3 news outlets had picked up the story. By Thursday evening, the building's corporate communications team had issued a statement. Measured, appropriately remorseful, carefully worded. It confirmed that the individual involved in the incident was no longer employed by the organization. It expressed the company's commitment to dignity and inclusion. It did not name Oyin. Oyin was in a different meeting when the statement went out. She read it on her phone between items on the agenda. She thought it was adequate. She thought adequate was probably the right register for a corporate statement. What she thought about more was the comment thread she had scrolled through that morning on her phone on the subway. Standing in the aisle because there were no seats, holding the overhead bar, reading the words of people she would never meet who had felt something in the 73 words of that post. A woman in Winnipeg who said she had cried reading it. A man in Halifax who said he was a building manager and was reviewing his own front desk protocols that morning because of what he'd read. A woman in Calgary who said she had experienced something similar 8 years ago, and no one had ever said anything about it, and seeing the post made her feel less alone. Oyin closed the comment thread. She looked up at the car she was in. A teenager across from her was asleep against the window. An older man 2 seats down was carefully folding a newspaper into quarters. A woman with 2 small children was negotiating a disagreement about a red backpack. The ordinary texture of a day. She put her phone in her pocket. The apology from building management came on Friday morning. Formal, written, delivered by Gordon Achibi, in person, along with a letter signed by the board chair. It cited the specific policy infractions. It described the remedial training program that was being implemented for all lobby staff, effective immediately. It acknowledged explicitly that the failure was not only Brett's individual action, but a gap in the culture that had allowed him to believe that action was appropriate. Oyin read the letter. She found the line about culture. She read it twice. She thought it was the most honest line in the document. She signed the acknowledgement and gave it back to Gordon. She thanked him for the process. She asked to see the training program before it was finalized. He said, of course. He left. Daphne came to the door with her afternoon schedule. "The Fairfax call confirmed for 3 o'clock, and you have the benefit dinner tonight. The Rosedale Children's Foundation. You're presenting the signature gift." Oyin had forgotten about the dinner. She looked at the schedule. She looked at the window. The lake was doing something interesting in the afternoon light, turning a color between green and gray that didn't have a name. Exactly. The way the lake sometimes does in the transition between seasons, when winter and spring are still working out their arrangement. Book me a car for 6:30, she said, and cancel the hotel reservation. I'll stay at home. Done, Daphne said. After she left, Oyin sat at her desk for a moment. She was thinking about a conversation she'd had the previous year with a young woman who was in the second cohort of a mentorship program. Adebisi Capital Group ran for women in technology, specifically for women of color in technology, specifically for women who had grown up without the particular kind of access that makes certain rooms feel like they already belong to you. The young woman had asked her, "What do you do when you walk into a room and you can feel that people have already decided what you are?" Oyin had thought about it for a long time before answering. She had said, "You let them finish deciding, and then you do the work, and then you wait." The young woman had looked slightly unsatisfied with this answer. The way young people reasonably look when they want something more immediate, something that lands harder. Oyin had said, "I know that doesn't feel like enough, but the decision they've made about you, it isn't solid. It's just the first draft. The work you do is the revision. And revision always wins." She had not been sure, at the time, whether that was wisdom or just the thing she told herself to get through rooms that didn't want to hold her. She was more sure of it now. The benefit dinner was held at a hotel on King Street. 200 people in a ballroom. The kind of event where the tables cost more per seat than some people earn in a month. And everyone in the room knows this, and no one says it directly. And the work of the evening is to alchemize that discomfort into generosity, which, when it works, is genuinely a kind of miracle. Oyin arrived at 7:20. She was wearing a dark blue dress she had bought in Lagos 3 years ago, and had saved for specific occasions ever since, because it was the kind of dress that did something specific to how she moved through a room. Not because of the way it looked, exactly, but because of what she remembered when she wore it. The afternoon she'd bought it. The market. The light. The feeling, for a single quiet hour in a foreign city, of being completely unknown to anyone. She liked that feeling, occasionally. The luxury of anonymity. She had learned to treat it as a gift when it came, and not to mourn it when it went. At the table, she was seated next to a woman named Joelle Marchetti, who ran a policy institute out of Ottawa, and who Oyin had met twice before at other functions. They talked about the federal budget, about a documentary they had both apparently watched on the same evening the previous week, about Joelle's daughter, who was applying to medical schools, and finding the process considerably more exhausting than anticipated. It was the kind of conversation Oyin loved, unimportant on the surface, completely real underneath. Midway through the main course, a man across the table introduced himself as a senior partner at a firm Oyin recognized. He had the particular manner of someone who has been comfortable for so long that comfort has become invisible to him, like water to a fish. He asked her what she did. She told him. He did the recalibration thing. She watched him do it and said nothing, and waited for the moment to pass. It passed. "I read something about your building," he said after a moment. "The situation this week." "Yes," she said. "How are you feeling about how it was handled?" She considered the question. She appreciated that he had asked how it was handled, rather than asking something that would have required her to justify the story itself. "I think the response was appropriate," she said. "I think the harder work is what comes after the response. The part that doesn't make a statement." He nodded. He was listening, actually listening, which she had learned to notice because it was less common than it should be. "My daughter works in finance," he said. "Junior analyst, 2 years in. She calls me sometimes after certain meetings." He paused. "I don't always know what to say to her." Oyin thought about the mentorship program. She thought about the young woman who had asked her what to do when the room had already decided. "Tell her to stay," Oyin said, "and to do the work, and to wait, and to call you every time." He looked at her for a moment. Something moved across his face that wasn't the recalibration thing. Something older than that. "Thank you," he said. The presentation of the signature gift happened at 9 o'clock. Oyin walked to the podium. The room settled. She had done this enough times that the silence before she spoke no longer felt like pressure. It felt like a room paying attention, which was what it was. She did not have notes. She talked about the Rosedale Children's Foundation, about the specific program the gift was funding, a technology education initiative in 6 underfunded schools across the city. She talked about what access means, in concrete terms, what it means to be a child who never sees someone who looks like them doing the thing they want to do, what it means to be that child and then become the thing anyway, how long that takes, how much it costs. She did not talk about Wednesday morning. She did not talk about Brett, or the lobby, or the hand on her arm, but she talked about walking into rooms. She talked about being assessed at the door. She talked about what it does to a child to grow up believing that certain rooms belong to certain people, and how that belief doesn't stay in childhood. How it follows people, how it follows whole communities, through decades and careers and buildings and boardrooms and benefit dinners on King Street. She talked about what it costs a society to put its energy into that kind of sorting. She talked about what becomes possible when it stops. The room was very quiet. She paused at the end. She looked out at 200 people in a ballroom on King Street, in the middle of a city that was still always working out what it wanted to be. The children in these 6 schools, she said, are not waiting for permission to be excellent. They are excellent right now. Our job, all of us, is simply to get out of the way. The applause started before she had fully stepped back from the microphone. Later, in the car going home, she looked out the window at the city. The streets were wet from an earlier rain she had missed being indoors, and the lights ran long and distorted in the puddles, the way city lights do at night when the ground is holding water. She watched a couple under an umbrella waiting at a crosswalk, a man walking a dog, a woman closing up a fruit stand, stacking the last crates with the particular efficiency of someone who has done the same thing 1,000 times. The ordinary texture of a day. Her phone had 17 messages. She would answer them tomorrow. She thought about Brett. She thought about him not as a villain. She had stopped casting people as villains some time ago, because it was too comfortable a category, too clean. But as a person who had been trained into a set of assumptions about who belonged where, and who had acted on those assumptions without thinking, the way people act on all their deepest assumptions, as though they were simply facts about the world. She thought about the fact that he would carry Wednesday morning with him for the rest of his career. She hoped he would do something useful with it. She thought about her mother. She thought about the Scarborough house. She thought about working 2 jobs at 23 and standing in a basement apartment in January with the heat not quite working right, and knowing, with a certainty she could not have explained at the time, that she was not going to stay there. Not because she was better than the apartment, but because she had something to build and she was going to build it. She had built it. She was still building it. The car turned onto her street. The house was dark except for the light she always left on in the front hall. A habit from childhood, her mother's habit. The idea that a house should look like someone is home, even when you aren't quite yet, like a welcome prepared in advance. She took her keys from her bag. She found her badge in the bowl by the door, where it had been all along. She set her bag down in the hallway. She stood for a moment in the quiet of her own house, in the city she had decided was hers 20 years ago, on a night not unlike this one, when she had looked at it from a distance and thought, I am going to belong to this place, whether it is ready for me or not. It was getting more ready. So was she.